and the Subcommittee on Energy and Water will please come to order. Today's hearing is going to review the fiscal year 23 budget request for the Department of Energy. Thank you, Senator Granholm, for joining us today. I'm particularly pleased to see you again and back this year. A lot has happened since we last saw you, including historic funding for the department through the bipartisan infrastructure bill and our recent fiscal year 2022 spending bill. I know that implementing this funding has been keeping the department busy. The administration's fiscal year 2023 request for the department totals $48.6 billion, representing a more than $3.7 billion increase from last year. And that's billion, not million. As I understand this, most of this proposal increase is aimed at reducing our fossil fuel consumption and addressing climate change. Your budget includes funding for research and development of renewable energy, batteries, electric vehicles, and also demonstrates these technologies at a scale that would reduce emissions. These investments, I believe, are important as we continue to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels for heating our homes and powering our cars. Recent international conflicts have highlighted the need to pursue domestic, cost-effective solutions for our energy consumption. And energy independence is national security. So I want to take a moment to applaud the administration's continued resolve to act aggressively to combat climate change. Ranking Member Kennedy will be here shortly and has asked that we move ahead, so we will. And I might ask the senator that is here if she would have any opening statements on behalf of her side.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I have a number of issues that I hope to bring up with the Secretary today. They range from energy storage, which we need to improve in order to integrate renewables into the electric grid, and to weatherization programs that will help us conserve, to exciting work on deep water offshore wind energy that's being performed at the University of Maine. So I look forward to discussing all of those issues, and I want to thank the chairwoman for her leadership. Thank you.
Excellent, and thank you. Madam Secretary, please proceed.
Thank you so much, Chair Feinstein, and to Senator Collins, and in absentia, all of the committee members who I know are really interested in this topic regarding the Department of Energy and our 2023 budget request. I'm so proud to lead this department as the 16th Secretary of Energy, and I'm grateful for the support that you've given to the Department of Energy, including through the 2022 omnibus legislation. Under the Biden administration, as you have noted, Madam Chair, the Department of Energy is committed, deeply committed to increasing energy security, affordability, and resilience. We are committed to securing the clean energy supply chain that's necessary to reduce our reliance on unabated fossil fuels and to increase our energy independence. Like the $3 billion from the bipartisan infrastructure law for battery manufacturing that we announced on Monday. We are also committed to strengthening America's competitiveness by accelerating scientific discovery and innovation. And these commitments are reflected in this budget, and a look around the world shows us that this is the right focus with the right priorities for this moment in history. Right now, we face a trio of crises. One is climate change, which cost the United States $148 billion last year alone in damages from extreme weather. Then the second is COVID-19, and of course now Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which is costing American families right now, too, as they see prices rising from gas stations to grocery stores. So let me be clear first that the Department of Energy is using every tool available to increase oil and energy supply. In late March, for example, the President authorized the release of 1 million barrels per day from our Strategic Petroleum Reserve over the next 6 months, 180 million barrels total, coordinating with our international allies and partners who also committed to releasing another 60 million barrels. And I appreciate Congress's support of President Biden's ban on Russian energy imports. We're also working to offer relief to American families at home through the $3.5 billion Weatherization Assistance Program that was provided in the bipartisan infrastructure law. But ultimately, these crises tell us that energy security and energy independence and energy affordability all depend on a shift toward American-made clean energy. And that's why we're working with our international allies to advance alternative energy sources and boost clean energy manufacturing. It's why we're grateful that Congress, through the Energy Act of 2020 and the bipartisan infrastructure law, has invested in clean building technologies here at home with American parts and American labor. I'm grateful that we are with members of Congress that they have demonstrated the faith in our department to oversee a lot of these investments in the new offices, the clean energy goals, the supply chain goals that come with them. We're hard at work implementing this legislation here at Department of Energy. Most recently, DOE began accepting applications, for example, for the $6 billion in civilian nuclear credit for the existing fleet of nuclear plants, a way to keep reliable and clean energy online. The $62 billion from the bipartisan infrastructure law that came to the Department of Energy is an historic investment in projects that'll serve our nation for decades, but on its own, it's not sufficient to address the nation's full energy challenges, and that's why our request includes base year funding for efforts to complement the bipartisan infrastructure law in order to maximize its impact, to lower costs, and provide clean, reliable, secure American power. This request also supports our Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, our Office of Science, the 17 national labs, which sharpen our innovative capacity and our competitive edge. And of course, our budget includes funding for DOE missions that keep our country safe, like environmental management and nuclear security. I'm proud of DOE's work to confront our nation's most pressing challenges. I reaffirm my commitment to leading this extraordinary department with its extraordinary employees as we implement congressional actions from the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Energy Act, and to those still to come, hopefully the Bipartisan Innovation Act and the President's full agenda for building a better America. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Secretary. It's my understanding that this administration has taken several steps to try to address this issue and has tapped the Strategic Petroleum Reserve 3 different times to try to get more gas into the market. I support these actions and agree that we should take as many steps as we can to address gasoline prices. Madam Secretary, excuse me, can you explain whether oil being released from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is going to be able to create any meaningful relief at the pump? And what else can be done, if anything?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for this question. As we know, the invasion of Ukraine, Russia is a huge exporter of oil on the global market, and the invasion of Ukraine pulled initially 1.5 to 2 million barrels per day off of that global market. So for us in the United States, we are asking how can we increase enough supply so that when supply like that is crunched, the prices don't go up out of control. The biggest tool we have in our arsenal is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And so the President has called, first of all, upon our oil and gas industry to produce more with the permits that they have and the ability that they have to increase supply. Second, he's called for the release of 1 million barrels per day for the next 6 months as the oil and gas industry improves their production. The Energy Information Agency has said that by the end of this year, that we will see an additional 1 million barrels per day from our domestic suppliers. And so that's why the president has called for an increase in 1 million barrels per day from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to balance out the markets. Now, the U.S. has said we will not accept Russian oil, which is great. So has Canada and a number of other nations. The EU is on the verge of doing something similar. If the EU pulls their supply, if they say no more Russian oil for us, that will be another perhaps 1.5 million barrels that are pulled off the market. So then we'll have about 3 million barrels off the market. That will create additional volatility. We'll see prices likely to increase. So while we are doing all we can to make sure that supply and demand meet itself to stabilize, I think this war has only accelerated the urgency with which we must move to electrify transportation and to move toward clean energy. Clean energy that is American-made is energy that is not going to be subject to the volatility of petro-dictators, to the volatility of a fossil fuel market that is global in nature. So that's why the president's goal is to try to stabilize supply now and try to move as well toward clean energy. And finally, I will say that the president is doing everything he can within his power in this global market to make sure that we lessen our demand on oil, for example, by increasing the E15, the ethanol blend in gasoline, taking that to E15 so that we reduce, again, the amount of oil that's necessary. This is a very, very difficult situation, but I think ultimately it screams that we must accelerate toward clean energy.
I would just like to address one California question to you. We've discussed this previously, but we're experiencing a climate emergency, and California is bearing the brunt of a lot of these changes. We find that temperatures are causing more intense heat waves, making western wildfires more frequent, destructive, and deadly. These are straining our power grids and forcing us to rethink their design. Just last year in California, 2.5 million acres burned. It destroyed 3,600 structures. The recent infrastructure bill would provide billions to help states upgrade their aging infrastructure. And so we're pleased about that. But can you help us understand how quickly this historic funding can be implemented to help states upgrade their aging energy infrastructure?
Yes, thank you for that, too. The part I think that's very hopeful for California in the bipartisan infrastructure law related to energy infrastructure is the $5 billion for resiliency, which could be used for the purposes of undergrounding wires in strategic locations. And so we are in the process. We'll be putting out a funding opportunity announcement shortly. We just called for a request for information from stakeholders about how they would like to see that portion funded. I will also say, I know I'm over time, but we're also focused on the technology associated with the grid that will allow us to enhance sensors, drones, modeling, so that we know that we can anticipate when wildfires are coming, so that both the technology as well as undergrounding are hopeful improvements for California and states like it.
Thank you. Senator Collins?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Welcome, Madam Secretary. I want to talk to you about the importance of the Weatherization Assistance Program. In my state, 2/3 of the homes use heating oil to stay warm. And just last week, the cost of a gallon of heating oil exceeded $6. That is a record high that I have never seen in our state, and it's causing tremendous hardship. We know that the Weatherization Assistance Program makes a big difference in states like Maine, where we have some of the oldest housing stock in the nation. That means a lot of uninsulated attics and leaky windows, which causes discomfort but also wasted energy. And that's why I've been such a long-time supporter of the Weatherization Assistance Program. The bipartisan infrastructure law, which you've mentioned, and which I was one of 10 senators who negotiated it, included $3.5 billion for additional funding for the Weatherization Program. In light of this large infusion of new funding, Senator Reid and I, along with several of our colleagues, sent you a letter on January 13th urging you to update the program's regulation and guidance to ensure that the money could be spent more efficiently and reach more people. I regret to say that we've not yet received a response to that January letter, and I would ask you today what improvements you see to help simplify and enhance the effectiveness of the Weatherization Program.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your longtime support of weatherization. I agree with you about the utter importance. There's 39 million homes that are eligible for weatherization, and unfortunately, we can only do in a given year 35 to 40,000 of them. And so there's such a great need out there. That big slug from the bipartisan infrastructure law will enable us to do hundreds of thousands more. Here's the update, and it's reflected in the budget. One is that, as you know, many homes aren't eligible, even though their income levels of the owners of the homes are eligible, because they may have a unstructurally safe roof, or they may have mold. And so part of the update reflected in this budget is another $30 million to make homes pre-weatherization ready, so that we can go in and do some of the structural changes on the homes that most need it. I mean, these are homes that need it more than anything, but the regulations are such that they haven't been eligible. So we are doing this pre-weatherization pilot, and we want to be able to see this expanded. We'll come back and let you all know how that works, but we're very excited about that. Some local, I don't know if in Maine they do, but many states have their own pre-weatherization strategy where they get their own state funding for it, but it's clearly necessary. The second update is that, as you know, we spend a lot of money every year on the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP. And that money goes to people who are low income and can't afford their bills, but often they're probably living in homes that need weatherization, and that's why their bills are so high. So we are combining now that effort. So we have asked in this budget for another $100 million to do a focus on the LIHEAP homes for weatherization, so that we can end up as a government saving money, but we can target the weatherization efforts on the homes that clearly need it most.
Thank you for that update. A second issue of great interest to me is energy storage. I was the lead author of the Better Energy Storage Technologies Act, also known as the BEST Act, which became law in December of 2020, and it authorizes long-duration grid-scale energy storage demonstration projects with the goal of strengthening the resiliency and reliability of the grid and making it more feasible to incorporate renewables like wind and solar. Again, the bipartisan infrastructure law included $500 million for these demonstrations. My office has been contacted by several companies, including some in Maine, who are interested in accessing this funding. And again, I would point out, it did become law in December of 2020. DOE has yet to issue any requests for information or otherwise provided details on how it plans to implement the demonstration program. When can we expect to see energy storage demonstration announcements from DOE?
Yes.
This really is the holy grail of incorporating renewables is improving storage.
1,000%. Couldn't agree with you more. Thank you again for your leadership on this. You are absolutely correct. We had a roundtable with stakeholders in April to be able to get feedback for how we should be thinking about this. There's 3 funded efforts that will be under that $500 million umbrella. One is demonstrations, one is an energy storage pilot grant program, and the third is long-duration demonstrations. We will be issuing an RFI very soon, and I can have our team brief you on that, or your team on it separately. We'll make sure that somebody does that, because I think it's within May we will be issuing the first RFI.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. You made it clear that you support safe and workable solutions dealing with nuclear waste. But for several years, we've included $20 million in appropriations for consent-based siting of interim nuclear waste storage. And the department has also requested additional information from stakeholders to develop a plan going forward on interim waste. That's my understanding. Can you bring us up to date and discuss how the administration plans to break this stalemate on nuclear waste disposal? I know there's a recent request for information, but it's taken a long time, and I've watched literally nothing happen.
Well, the good news is things are moving. So the request for information that we issued at the end of last year, we received over 200 responses. Now, I'm not saying that there are 200 communities that are saying, sign me up. There may be some that were in opposition, but we are assessing what we got back, and then we will proceed with a funding opportunity. But we will proceed, with the next step, which is to really get honed in on who might be interested from the information we glean. You know, the communities that are interested in this are going to want to know how they will be compensated for the service to the nation of being able to store this fuel safely. And so the first step is to get this RFI and understand what they're doing. Then we will do a next step on that to hone it in. That will happen, I think, in the summer. And so we will be proceeding. It is our determination to have this issue resolved as well from an interim basis, which is what the step is we're talking about. And so we're enthused by the conversations that we've had with a number of communities.
Thank you. Senator, any other questions?
I do. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Secretary, we've discussed previously a world-class consortium led by the University of Maine in floating offshore wind technology. I have worked with the university for many years on this project. I'm very excited about it. The university is pioneering a new era of energy independence by harnessing powerful deep water offshore winds through one of the Energy Department's offshore wind demonstration projects. The advantage of offshore wind is you can place the turbines far enough offshore so you can't see them from the shore. And the university's working with our fishing industry to make sure we're not interfering there. But once completed, this project, which is known as Aquaventus, will deploy the nation's first floating deep-water offshore wind turbines off the coast of Maine. And in my state alone, the offshore wind industry has the potential to support an annual average of more than 2,000 jobs, which is very exciting. I want to urge you to focus on this kind of technology, the floating deepwater offshore wind technology, which is being developed at the University of Maine, in addition to the work the department's doing on conventional fixed-bottom offshore wind projects. How is the department prioritizing the advancement of domestic innovative clean energy technologies, particularly in the floating offshore wind space?
Yes, thanks for this, too. I share your enthusiasm about offshore wind, and the University of Maine, honestly, has been doing some amazing work, not just in offshore wind, but in materials, and, it's you've got a great university there. We're excited both about offshore and fixed bottom. Offshore, Senator Feinstein knows this too, will be particularly relevant for the Pacific coast as well, since there's such a steep drop in the shoreline. It's not graduated like it is on much of the Atlantic coast. So the technology that is being developed, and that it will be the first offshore wind platform everyone will be watching and learning from. I just came from an offshore wind conference on the Atlantic in New Jersey, where the offshore wind world was there looking at both these technologies and prioritizing both of them. Obviously, it's we have a lot of European input because Europe has been much more advanced in deploying offshore wind technology, both floating and fixed bottom. And so we're learning from them, and we're learning from what our own great minds at the University of Maine are producing. We look forward to the continued relationship with the University of Maine on this because you are at the forefront.
Thank you. Madam Chair, would you mind if I asked one more question? Thank you. You actually anticipated in many ways my next question, and it has to do with advanced composite materials and manufacturing methods, including large-scale additive manufacturing and the manufacturing of bio-based composites, because they really have the potential to revolutionize our manufacturing sector. And I appreciate the fact that there's more than $582 million for advanced manufacturing in the department's budget request. Starting in fiscal year 2019, DOE awarded $20 million in funding to support a truly innovative collaboration between the University of Maine and Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And through this partnership, the University of Maine has secured the world's largest 3D printer and recently printed the world's largest 3D printed boat at 25 feet and 5,000 pounds. They also are working with the Department of Defense to produce vessels that could be used to transport cargo for our armed forces. And this is a very exciting collaboration between one of our national labs and the University of Maine. And the great thing about it is not only does it produce innovation, but it supports job growth in the forest products industry, manufacturing, composites, wind, boat building. Could you discuss how the department plans to maintain and foster these kinds of collaborations between our national labs and universities that will help us maintain America's leadership in advanced manufacturing?
Yes, thank you for that, too. Again, pointing to the University of Maine as leading the way. But the notion that you have a full spectrum, the Oak Ridge National Lab, which has this great expertise in additive manufacturing, and the fact that the university is supplying also next-generation talent. So it's really a full spectrum. And that Oak Ridge also works, it's a facility that works with the private sector as well, having a great manufacturing site there that allows for them to be able to take advantage of their additive manufacturing, their 3D printing machines. I just to link this conversation with the previous question. I'm sorry, we're way over. Testing. Is that better? Maybe. Just to link with the previous, because the 3D printing of wind turbine blades, for example, using bio-based materials. We'll be able to make sure that the life cycle of wind turbine blades means that it can be recycled eventually. So the combination of all of these technologies is where the DOE sweet spot is, and being able to ensure that next generation students, the STEM students that we need for our labs and for our scientific endeavors, see it in action. And so we're excited about that too.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Murray, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Feinstein. Senator Granholm, welcome to you. You know, your department is responsible for so many critical programs across the country and in my home state of Washington, but I want to focus my questions on one today, and that is the Hanford site. As I have told you and Director Young and other members of this administration repeatedly, the federal government has a moral and legal obligation to clean up the Hanford site, and failure to adequately fund the mission there really jeopardizes that promise. The FY22 omnibus provided $2.6 billion for the site. Your department's FY23 request proposes cutting funding for the site by $172 million. Now, I know the administration did not use the FY22 enacted levels in developing its request, but the FY23 request represents cuts from the FY21 enacted levels as well. And it also fails to meet the funding needs that the department itself has identified at the site. One area that really illustrates that disconnect is the river corridor and other cleanup operations account. The department's 2022 Hanford Life Cycle Report projected that this account needed $261.5 million to keep pace with the tri-party agreement's milestones. But your FY23 budget only requests $135 million for that account. Do you believe that request is adequate?
I look forward to working with you on this. I know that we need to fund the commitments.
Well, how'd you get to that request? It's half of what the department
I understand.
says is required.
I understand. It's honestly, it's a question of balancing out what our numbers are across the whole environmental management portfolio.
Well, I assure you at the site, numbers, it's not just numbers. It's about an incredibly important site in this country.
Yes.
And we have a requirement to make sure we clean that up.
Yes. Yes, I know, and I so appreciate your advocacy on this, and I look forward to visiting. I'm sorry that my
It's more than advocacy, it's an obligation. And
it is, I hear you, and I agree with you.
Okay, well, let me ask you about Building 324, because cleanup of that site is extremely important to the Hanford communities. FY23 was supposed to fund the infrastructure needed to start cleanup beneath that building. Your request would not support that work. Does FY23 request just kick the can down the road on cleanup of Building 324?
We will maintain Building 324, and that should be included in the next budget. We are not at all blind to how important it is to address it. It should be safe for this year. It will be maintained and safeguarded. But again, this was a question of balancing the funding priorities. And so...
Well, the high-level waste facility is only at the beginning of its significant lifestyle costs. In FY23, the Office of River Protection is slated to get ready for the resumption of construction at that facility. Now, according to the department's estimates, the facility's funding requirements are going to double between 23 and 24 and continue to grow throughout the rest of this decade. Does your FY23 request adequately support the facility's coming funding needs?
We believe this is a good budget. We believe this will make sure that the site is safe and we continue to do work on it. However, we acknowledge that there are differing equities and points of view, and we look forward to working with you on it.
Okay, well, explain to us why the department proposes major increases for nuclear weapons and naval reactors, but cuts cleanup sites like Hanford.
Again, this is a question of balancing equities across all of the portfolio at DOE. We believe Hanford is extremely important. It is the largest cleanup site that we have. We have other cleanup sites, as you know, across. We want to make sure that we do right by the whole of the budget, and so it is a balance.
Well, Madam Secretary, Madam Chairwoman, FY24 is going to be really critical for this site. And I'm really disappointed by this year's request. We've got to do better than this.
I understand.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate you holding the hearing today. So thank you so much. Chairman, good to see you again. Or, excuse me, Secretary, I'm sorry. Good to see you, Secretary. Thanks for being here. I want to start right out on CCUS, as you know, something you and I have talked about many times. In terms of getting these projects going, and of course, we appreciate you coming out to our state last year. As a matter of fact, on Monday of this week, I was part of dedicating the purchase of the Coal Creek coal-fired electric plant, 1,100 megawatt plant, which is quite a large plant. That was purchased by Rainbow Energy, a remarkably innovative energy company in North Dakota, from Great River Energy, Minnesota-based utility cooperative. And so they are moving forward, and of course, part of their plan is to do CCUS, to have CCUS attached. They also have a biofuels plant on site where they've already started the carbon capture piece as well, and they want to do the carbon capture on the coal-fired electric plant. Not too far from them is another facility, Minn Kota, another cooperative-owned large coal-fired electric power plant, and they have what's called Project Tundra, which is their plan to put carbon capture on their coal-fired electric plant. And then not too far to the west of them, we have the Dakota Gasification Company, which actually converts lignite coal to synthetic natural gas. They already do carbon capture for tertiary oil recovery and have been doing that for some time. Started that back when I was governor. Now for the rest of their CO2 stream, they already separate the CO2. 50% of that stream goes downhole for tertiary recovery. The other 50% now, they are actually building the tertiary storage piece for that, and we'll do geologic storage, not tertiary, geologic storage for the remaining 50% of their CO2 stream to capture the 45Q tax credit. So that's what's going on. Now, what we need, there are three things that we've put in place that we need your help on to keep these projects moving. The first is the front-end investment funds, so DOE grants that help put the equipment on these plants to capture the CO2. That's one. Number two, the loan guarantees for the investment they have to make so that they can finance it on favorable terms for the equipment that it takes to separate the CO2. So first, the help with the front-end funding. Two, the loan guarantees, both through DOE but also through RUS if they're a cooperative. And then making sure that they're capturing the 45Q tax credit. So, one, we need your help to do this, and we need your commitment to access these programs in a timely and efficient way to make this happen. This is about cracking the code on carbon capture and leading the way forward. So tell me about your commitment, your willingness to help, and what you can do to make this happen sooner versus later.
Great, thank you.
And accessing these programs.
Yeah, appreciate it. I mean, first, as you're aware, the biggest opportunity is through the bipartisan infrastructure law, $10 billion commitment to carbon capture and sequestration. Obviously, North Dakota and Wyoming, hugely ripe states for that, given your geology.
Really, the only two states with all the regulatory approvals to do it, both state and federal EPA approvals to do it. So we're ready to go.
Primacy. Yes, we know. And so you've got great examples of projects. We expect that we will start to roll out the request for information and the funding opportunity announcements closer to the end of this year. So look forward to that. The Loan Programs Office, too. We have an additional request in our budget because they have, even though they have a $40 billion budget, they've got $75 billion worth of requests for the Loan Program Office services. So hopefully you can help us on that side on the budget. And the 45Q tax credit, I'm just hopeful that we are able to increase the value of that tax credit through additional tax incentive, upping the number so that it becomes really commercially smart and get rewarded by the private sector to be able to capture the CO2 So on all three, I am bullish about being able to be very helpful.
Appreciate that. Also, as you know, we have to be able to capture and put the CO2 down whole through the Energy Environmental Research Center, which you have visited at the University of North Dakota. They have a partnership with DOE called PCOR, which is the Plains CO2 reduction partnership, PCOR. Very important that we continue that partnership and that funding continues so that they can continue to do the work so that we can put that CO2 downhole. So that's both funded in our approach budget, and it's also, those contracts are in place. We need you to make sure your people are working to get them the funding so they can continue to do that part of the equation too.
Great. I know they really enjoy working with them. So
yeah, it's been a good partnership.
Yeah.
Last thing is, can you help us expedite FERC so that we can get both pipelines to move natural gas around the country, very important right now, as well as LNG facilities? Is there something you can do to expedite those approvals or help expedite those approvals with FERC? We need that transmission badly.
Well, we know that we have right now in terms of terminals. Are you talking about LNG?
Well, I'm talking both pipelines to move
right.
LNG so we don't have stranded natural
Right.
gas at a
Right.
time when we need it, as well as the LNG.
Yeah,
For
I know.
us, actually, the pipelines are really important nationally and internationally, the LNG facility.
Yeah, I mean, we want to make sure that there's not flaring, and so you have to make sure that the associated gas is captured and moved. So, yes, FERC has already, I think, approved 12 pipeline projects just this year, and they are well aware of the importance of this, especially given the geopolitical concerns that everyone shares about the increase in fuel costs, but also the pulling back of fossil fuels and the cost as a result of the war. So, and our allies needing liquefied natural gas as well. So we've permitted at DOE an additional 4 terminals to be able to send liquefied natural gas to non-free trade agreement entities like Europe. And I know FERC is also permitted, FERC and DOE have permitted another 30 billion cubic feet per day of liquefied natural gas permission, although some of those terminals are not being built yet.
I apologize for going over my time. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Feinstein, for holding this hearing. Secretary Granholm, thank you for being here today. Secretary, last year you divested a large financial stake in Proterra, an electric bus manufacturing company. Is that correct?
Correct.
Why did you divest it?
Why did I divest? Because I was appointed. Every appointee has to divest of individual stocks.
They have to divest for what reason?
For ethics reasons, you want to make sure that if you are involved in any decisions related to, for example, electrification of buses, that there's not a conflict. So I divested early.
I appreciate your executive experience, and I appreciate the fact that you undertook your responsibilities in a very serious manner to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest, in this case where you had responsibility. I want to ask you another question. Do you know Hunter Biden?
I've met him.
Have you ever had an opportunity, or your staff had an opportunity, to discuss energy policy with Hunter Biden, given his experience in this space?
No.
Well, let me turn to another set of questions. Do you think it was appropriate for Vice President Biden to conduct foreign policy in the Ukraine while an influential Ukrainian energy company called Burisma was paying his son $1 million a year to serve on its board, or while a Russian billionaire was providing millions of dollars to Hunter Biden at the same time that Hunter Biden was apparently paying his father's living expenses?
With respect, sir, I'm here on the Department of Energy's budget. I'm not sure what relevance that has to the budget, and I also know that President Biden is an incredibly ethical human being and would never do anything that would demonstrate a conflict of interest.
Well, as a member of his cabinet and somebody who obviously takes conflicts of interest very seriously, I wanted to see what your opinion was. I've got another couple of items to ask you about. Hunter Biden rode on Air Force Two to China to conduct business deals with CCP-aligned figures at the same time that his father was meeting with and conducting foreign policy there with China. Does that seem right to you? Would you have allowed that if you were vice president?
Sir, I'm not here to opine on something that might have happened in the previous administration. I'm here to talk about the Department of Energy budget.
Well, in this administration, in 2021, while his father was president, Hunter Biden still owned an interest in BHR Partners. He owned that in partnership with Chinese Communist Party entities. And right after his death, President Biden met with Xi Jinping. It was announced by Hunter Biden's lawyer that he'd divested his interest in that entity. Yet no one's given the details about when he divested it, how much profit he made. Do you think that's appropriate?
Sir, I have no information about any of the things that you're talking about.
Well, let's just go through the basic facts, because I think you do appreciate the importance of ethics in government, the importance of avoiding the appearance of conflicts of interest. But we have emails and photographs that show that President Biden, while he was vice president, running U.S. foreign policy in Ukraine, met with several of his son Hunter's business associates, including a Burisma executive, the Ukrainian energy company that, again, paid Hunter millions of dollars. You've got the $3.5 million payment from a Russian billionaire that happened around the same time. You've got Hunter traveling to China on Air Force Two, conducting business there while his father is vice president. I mean, all of this, I would think, is very concerning, particularly given the fact that it looks like there's a mix of personal and official business here. I don't think that you would want to see that. Would you allow personal and business and business interests to be mixed in that regard?
Sir, I'm not going to buy the assumptions in the question.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you have taken your ethical responsibilities seriously here. I think the American public is very concerned about what may have transpired, and I think the Biden White House should be transparent to the American people about this. I appreciate your willingness to act in a transparent fashion to deal with any potential conflict of interest on your own. I think you set an example for this administration. I wish the administration would live by its own dictates and actually be responsible in their own disclosures. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you, Chairman Feinstein. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with Secretary Granholm. I want to get back to energy. Diesel fuel in Montana is $5.44 a gallon, okay? There's a little tax on that, but it's $5.44 a gallon, which is a lot. And we've got a situation right now where energy companies are making record profits. They're doing stock buybacks. They're charging the hell out of the consumer and quite frankly, blaming a lot of different issues. When the fact is that if they quit using this war as an opportunity to jack up prices, I think we'd see a better situation for the consumers. We also see last year, for example, everything west of the Mississippi being in a drought. Everything east of the Mississippi had more water than they needed. I happen to be one of those guys west of the Mississippi, and we had the worst crop we've ever had in the history since my grandfather homesteaded it in 1910. We didn't cut but a small fraction of what we normally harvest. So climate change is a problem, and choices for consumers is a problem right now. Because quite frankly, I can't put anything but diesel in my truck or my tractor, and I'd like to be able to run it on batteries, okay? I'd like to be able to run my field tractor on batteries. Now, this ain't a 30-horse tractor. This is a 375-horse tractor. I'd like to be able to run it on batteries. I'd like to be able to take my farm at some point in time and take it off the grid and have solar and wind and put that into batteries and be able to run my farm off batteries, okay? Because I got great wind resources, trust me, where I live. The question becomes, you as visionary, somebody who takes your job quite seriously as Secretary of Energy, is what does this budget do to move the ball forward in new generation that doesn't add to climate change, in battery technology, in carbon sequestration to try to be better and cheaper with that on existing plants, in making nuclear waste benign? Enlighten me, because I'm going to tell you, I'm 65 years old. I got about another 8 or 10 years left on the farm, God willing. And in that 10 years, I want to have a tractor that I can't hear because it's got an electric motor.
I want you to have that, and I think you will have that, really, because we have this, first of all, technology is the answer, right? We are focused on so much of the advances you've just described, whether it's on battery or on wind and renewables or on carbon capture sequestration or on biofuels or on advanced vehicle technology. All of that is encapsulated within the energy efficiency and renewable energy increase that we're asking for this committee to support and for the whole budget. But it's also reflected in the bipartisan infrastructure law that you were supportive of as well. So carbon capture, for example, there's $10 billion in that bipartisan infrastructure law for carbon capture.
So the question is the real question here is, we've made some investments, but the status quo continues to be $5.44 diesel fuel. The status quo is not an affordable battery right now. It's not a battery big enough. It's not there's all sorts of problems there. The status quo is carbon sequestration costs a bunch of money. If we can lower those costs, we can lower costs for consumers. Does this budget have adequate dollars in it to invest in the kind of things that we need for a 21st century energy portfolio?
Yes, it absolutely does. It invests in the research and deployment and development that will get us away from that. I mean, does this bring down the price of gas right now? No, but it invests in the technology that will get us to the point where you can have a tractor that you can't hear.
Well, I can say this. It doesn't matter what field you're in. If there's competition in the marketplace, the consumer gets a fair shake. And I've got a number of bills in the meatpacking industry, but you're not Secretary of Ag, you're Secretary of Energy. Truth is, there's no competition there. And I don't think there's near enough competition in the energy sector. And if we can develop some of these resources that, by the way, benefit both carbon-based fuels and non-carbon-based fuels, I think it's a step in the right direction. And you're the right person to do that job. Thank you very much for doing it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. The chair is pleased to call on the ranking member, Senator Kennedy. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry I was late. I was in another committee. Welcome, Madam Secretary.
Thank you.
I've still got a lot of work to do on your proposed budget, but I just wanted to offer a few top-line comments. After 15 months, I think any fair-minded person who's paid attention would have a general idea of the principles of the Biden administration. And it seems to me that the Biden administration believes in bigger government. It believes in higher taxes. It believes in more regulation. It believes in more debt. Based on the president's proposed budget, it believes in a weaker military. Not by its words, but by its actions, I think it believes in higher energy prices. I think that the Biden administration hates fossil fuels, on which, at the moment, the greatest economy in all of human history depends. I think the Biden administration thinks that's a mistake. And I think the Biden administration thinks that higher energy prices will somehow wean the American people off of fossil fuels. The attitude seems to be, not in words, but in deed, that we can see the future better than the American people because we're experts. And the American people just need to take their medicine with these higher energy prices, and in the long run, they'll be better off because we'll use them to get rid of fossil fuels. Now, let me talk about your budget. It's not going to pass in its current form. I think you know that. I support wind and power, but I'm an all of the above energy type guy. I think eventually we should and I don't mean sometime in the next century. We should realistically ask ourselves, when are wind and power going to be able to stand on their own feet without subsidies? I also believe in nuclear power. I can tell from your budget that at least some of your woke colleagues at the department don't. I also believe in hydroelectric power. I believe in hydrogen. I said it, but I'm going to say it again. I believe in nuclear. And I think you should ignore the woke voices. I think it's clean energy, and the new technology with these small modular nuclear reactors has great potential. You shortchanged them in your proposed budget. That tells me a lot. But I also believe in fossil fuels. And I think it's wholly unrealistic, certainly now, certainly for the foreseeable future, and maybe forever, to think that this world can run without fossil fuels. I'm very disappointed in your budget at its lack of emphasis on geoengineering. I know your woke colleagues don't like geoengineering because they think it takes our eye off the ball of climate change. But I think that's a mistake. I think climate change is real. But I think it will be solved or lessened by American ingenuity. It won't be done by the federal government. I'm also disappointed in the fact that the department, and that's why I say it's clear to me the Biden administration believes in a weaker military. Your decision not to fund one of the major weapons that the United States has at a time when our security is clearly threatened. Now, I've given you a mouthful. It is good to see you, Madam Chair. I am sorry I'm late. Please don't construe it as a sign of disrespect. I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Great. Thank you. Let me focus on a couple of things I think we can agree on. One is the importance of nuclear power and how it is an essential part of our clean baseload power, and we ought to be keeping the existing fleet afloat, and we just issued $6 billion in civilian nuclear credits to be able to do that, and to hopefully have as many of them stay operating as possible. But we've also got a $2.5 billion commitment in advanced nuclear reactors as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law column of our budget. That's number one. So we agree on that, and we want to continue funding the advanced nuclear reactors. Number two, we agree on hydroelectric power, and we want to see more dams, and we want to make sure that we are taking advantage of a form of energy that is clean, dispatchable baseload power. I would also throw geothermal in there in that same sort of category. With respect to wind and solar, your question about when they become essentially reliable baseload power is all contingent upon making sure that technology of batteries becomes cheaper. We have a goal, Earthshot, of getting down the price of long-duration storage by 90%. And when we get down the price of long-duration storage, essentially wind and power become clean, dispatchable baseload power. Here's where we don't agree. This administration believes in the importance of decarbonizing the fossil fuel industry. We know that we've gotten here for the past 120 years based upon fossil fuels. We acknowledge that. And we also know that technology for the next 100 years can power us going forward. Decarbonizing is really important. So we agree on hydrogen, for example, and that bipartisan infrastructure law invests $9 billion in hydrogen hubs. And I think one of them that's going to vie for it is in your region. Mm-hmm. But we make sure that we can decarbonize natural gas, for example, and couple it with carbon capture and sequestration. We're also big believers in the technology associated with direct air capture and other carbon dioxide removal strategies. That's another $3.5 billion in the budget.
Do you mind if I stop you and ask you a question about LNG? I saw the president's statement. I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. President, about a month ago, maybe a few weeks ago, time runs together, said, I want to expand LNG exports. But then I looked at the fine print of his statement. He said, but I want the plants that produce the LNG to be powered only with clean energy. And then he said, but I am not going to change the regulatory environment for oil and gas. And shortly after that, he came out with new proposed rules for NEPA that will make it impossible to build a pipeline. Don't you think that's misleading?
I'm not sure exactly what statement you're referring to, but he did go to Europe and said that we will provide another 15 billion cubic meters per year. We will increase our partnership with them. So as a result, the Department of Energy has permitted 4 additional LNG terminals, allowing their volumes to go to non-free trade agreement countries in a way to fulfill that. The Department of Energy and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission have both permitted another 30 billion cubic feet of export.
But don't you realize the impact that the proposed changes in NEPA are going to have on the oil and gas industry?
The proposed changes in NEPA are to make sure I am not in the EPA. It's not my column.
I know, but it's sure going to impact you.
The intent there is to continue to use technology to clean up fossil fuel emissions like methane. And so making sure that we've got facilities that are not contributing to the problem, but that are using technology, which they are excited to do. I mean, many in the natural gas world really do want to be able to deploy the technology that button down pipelines and make sure that they aren't contributing further to methane leakage.
But we tried to make NEPA a little more palatable, not get rid of it. Just say you've got to give us a decision in a couple of years. In the infrastructure bill, which the president is very proud of, and he has talked about it and taken credit for it. That's not a pejorative statement, every chance he's got. But then you turn right around and undo everything that was done in the infrastructure bill with these new proposed rules for NEPA. And I know it's coming from EPA, but Madam Secretary, you're extraordinarily intelligent. I've watched your career for years. You know as well as I do the impact this is going to have on LNG plants, on pipelines, on fossil fuel infrastructure. It's going to slow it down to the pace of an amoeba.
With respect, I fully disagree.
Okay.
I think that you can have, I think you can accelerate permitting and still respect the environment and not slow down the pace of energy production.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. It's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, too.
I'm going to call you about Mexico.
Okay.
They're confiscating our assets. We need to stop them.
We're on it. I hear you.
Senator Shaheen, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member, and thank you, Secretary Granholm. So nice to see you, and thank you for the great work that you and the Department of Energy are doing. We have all these Appropriations Subcommittee hearings going on at the same time, so getting from one to the other is challenging. But I want to start with what I think is the biggest concern on many of my constituents' minds, and I'm sure you're hearing this around the country, and that is the high cost of energy. Because of the pandemic and supply chain issues created there, because of the war in Ukraine, we are seeing the costs of energy go up in ways that people were not expecting. So what can we do to address that?
Thank you for the question. I mean, the president is obsessed about this. You know, he desperately, as like everybody, wants to make sure that people who go to get gasoline at the pump are not not just shocked, but hurt by it, especially people who are on fixed and moderate incomes. So the president has used the biggest tool in our arsenal, which is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, to try to make up for some of those barrels that have been pulled off the market because of the Russian invasion. So Russia right now has about 1.5 million barrels per day to 2 million off the market as a result of the United States rightfully saying we are not going to finance Putin's war. Canada, same thing. Europe is on the verge of deciding the same issue. If they too decide that they will not take Russian oil, that could get as much as 3 million barrels per day off the market. That supply constraint is what's causing prices to increase, which is why the president said we are going to issue 1 million barrels per day from our Strategic Petroleum Reserve to try to stabilize the market, in as much as he's also calling for increased production from the oil and gas industry. The Energy Information Agency is saying that by the end of this year, that the oil and gas industry in the U.S. will be producing another 1 million barrels per day, but we've still got a gap, which is why we're calling for all, oil-producing nations to step up at this moment and to not finance Russia's war. So that's number one. Number two, the president has also called upon an increase, for example, in ethanol blend, so that we reduce demand of oil, increase biofuels. It's a smaller strategy, but he's looking at every way he possibly can to try to address the problem. Ultimately, though, as you know, the solution lies in moving to clean energy. And so even as we're increasing supply right now, we have to accelerate the move and the technologies, which is what this budget represents, to clean.
Well, Vladimir Putin is certainly helping move us more expeditiously to address energy in a way that helps us deal with climate change. So in the short term, however, as we said, there are significant challenges for families. And so anything we can do to help address that, I think, is going to be very important. One of the things that I have worked on that we've discussed in the past over the years is how we address energy efficiency. It's the cheapest, fastest way to deal with our energy needs. One of the biggest, as you know, the largest single energy user in the United States is the federal government. And one of the best things we could do is to promote energy savings performance contracts within the federal government. Now, because of the way CBO scores those contracts, it is challenging for departments to use those because they are not scored as savings, they are scored as costs. I think we ought to change that. So far, I've not been able to convince my colleagues that that's something that makes sense. But can you talk about one of the things we saw during the Obama administration was a performance contracting challenge that resulted in 340 performance contracts and $8 billion in energy savings. Can you talk about the possibility of doing that kind of challenge again?
I would love to work with you on this because I think it is so important to be able to incentivize the installation of American-made products that end up reducing energy. It's such a triple win. And I think that particular challenge, if my numbers are right, created more than 30,000 jobs in American companies. So it's a win-win-win all the way around. And I would love to work with you on that because I love challenges. And I love to incentivize that. And I think that challenge was particularly effective. I'd love to see it happen again.
Great. Thank you. I look forward to doing that. We will follow up with the department. Great. The one other question I had was, in too many years in the past few, we have seen funding for the weatherization program and for state energy offices be slowed down. Can you talk about when our state energy offices can expect those dollars and whether we expect them to be distributed on time this year?
Yes, we are going to distribute them definitely on time. I just want to make sure I get you the right numbers here. So, in April we released a request for information on the, well, that was on the building codes piece of things. Wait a second. We are going, so we have $500 through the state energy program for the bipartisan infrastructure law. I know that they are working on the request for information so that they can shape the funding opportunity. Some of that is going to be formula, I believe, as well. We want to get as much of this out this year as possible while we're working on all of the other big slugs of the bipartisan infrastructure law. This is a hugely important one. We're working with states as well. You know, I'm a big believer in, as a former governor, I know you are too, in the bottom-up strategies, because so many at the local level know well how to do this, and they know what they want to do given their assets. And so both on the state energy grants as well as the future-looking energy grants, which incentivizes states to think about what additional technologies they want to help shore up inside of their state to be able to create jobs and perhaps industrial clusters around those energy technologies to create jobs. Both pieces of those, in addition to what we have known as Community Leap, which is getting communities that are at the back of the line often, who have a strategy of, for example, weatherizing a community to be provided technical assistance to navigate the federal system to be able to access some of these grant opportunities that they might not otherwise have the technical ability to do. All three of those.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I want to thank you for being here. We very much appreciate it. And the hearing record will remain open for 10 days. Senators may submit additional information or questions for the record within that time if they would like. The subcommittee requests that all responses to questions be provided within 30 days of receipt. And so thank you so much for being here, for your words, and the committee will stand adjourned.
Thank you.